You're listening to The Art of Imperfect Adulting. I'm your host, Amy Stone. Here, I share stories from real people navigating the adventure that I call adulting. Are you ready? Me too. Let's do this. Michele Leffler, welcome to Imperfect Adulting.
Thank you. I am so glad to be here.
Are you ready for a fun chat?
Yes, I am.
All right, let's do it. So the topic you suggested when I asked you whether or not you wanted to talk about a change, a decision, a pivot was widowhood. And I think that's really interesting. And the place I want to start this conversation is by allowing for you to share with the listeners today as much or as little as you want to about you and your family today.
Me and my family today, okay, vastly different than what it was when I went through this change. I became a widow when I was 31 in 2011. And so that was a lot of years ago. And I'm a lot older now. And I'm remarried. I have been remarried for the past 7 years. So that's kind of interesting to still talk about being a widow. And people are like, oh my gosh, I didn't know your husband died. I'm like, well, that was a different husband. But yeah, so there's that. But um, I'm different than what I was then too.
Sure.
So that means my whole family and view on family has changed. And I mean, it's different. I mean, becoming a widow changes you for sure.
For sure. So you and your husband, you've been married 7 years.
Yes.
Any pets, nieces, nephews, babies, anything?
I don't have children. My husband currently is older than me. He has an adult child. She's actually 2 years younger than me. So that's interesting too. So yes, he is significantly older than me. But I think that's funny because my stepdaughter, not that I call her that, but she technically is the same age as my younger sister. So every time I think of that, that's funny. We do have pets. We have a dog. She is a Dachshund Corgi mix, so a Dorgie, and she is adorable. We also have two pet turtles. Um, I do have lots of nieces and nephews because my sisters have children,
Okay.
and that's that's fun when I see
What
them,
kind
which
of
is not that
turtles?
often. I have red-eared slider turtles. So
Are
I
they
got them when they were
inside?
like they're inside, they're in a
Okay.
tank in water. So yeah, but I got them when they were hatchlings and they were the size of a quarter and they were
Wow.
really bright green and really pretty. And I mean, they don't look like that anymore. They grew, got darker and everything, but I still like them and everything. So yeah.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing. All right. So now I wanted to give people, I wanted to start in the present and give people a view of what you were like now. You hinted to this. Let's zoom back in time and talk about your earlier husband, your first husband. Give us the short story or the fun story or however it plays out about when you met and married that person. Tell us what your life was like then, what you were like and what your life was like then.
So at that time, I was very different than I am now. I was more of a quiet, more conservative style person in that I didn't go out and whatever and share my true self kind of thing. I lived my life the way my family wanted me to. I was always the good girl and I wanted to make people happy. And so I did what was expected of me, whether that was what I wanted or what really resonated with me. And we met and we had an instant attraction. That was in 2007 and we met in May of 2007 and got married in September of 2007. So it was very fast and everything. And I mean, we had a great life together, I thought, for 3 years, 3.5 years until he passed. There were challenges because there always are in marriage. Nothing's perfect, whatever. But overall, it was great.
That is very nice. So I have a follow-up question about your the marriage commitment ceremony at that time, which you
Right.
don't have to answer if you don't want to, but was it a faith-based, traditional, now forever and ever death do us part kind of ceremony?
Not really, because we went to the courthouse to
Okay.
get we were gonna do that at with the faith that we were in at the time, which is totally not the faith that I'm part of now. And that's part of my journey and change. But that's what we had wanted, but it wasn't going to work the way we wanted it to, and we just decided to just go to the courthouse, get it done. So it was a civil ceremony and everything,
Okay,
but
so yeah.
still
I mean, the
nice.
question was more about because we're talking about widowhood, that sort
Yeah.
of like fairy tale thing that we attach
We
to the
intended
ceremony.
it to be that, yes.
Yeah.
I have friends that still ask me now, if he had not died, would we still be together? I'm like, well, I don't know. That was
Right.
a long time ago.
That is, yeah, that is one of those questions that when it seems like such an innocuous question, but it's like, how would I know? Like, like that's
Like,
not what happened. I've actually lived the life I've
it's
lived.
like, if, he hadn't have died, would we still be together? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Would I still be the same person I was then? Would I be who I am now? I mean, I am a totally different person than when we were married. So it's like, don't ask me that. I don't know.
No, I think that's the right answer. There are questions that people have asked me like that and in my story. And I eventually realized that is a really hard question. That is not my favorite question. But
Yeah.
so I put this out early in the interview so that people would know that we were talking about widowhood. But let's talk about becoming a widow. So you guys were married for three
And a
years.
half
Three
years.
and a half years. You describe yourself as a young widow. If I listened correctly, if my ears were working, 31 is how old you
Yes,
were when
I
you were
was
widowed.
31. He was 24 when he died. So he was younger than me. He was
So you've
quite
done the age
young.
gap in two different directions in your life.
Yes. Yes, I did. So we were 6 years apart. I was 6 years older than him, and my current husband is 24 years older than me. So it's like, yeah, I've just never meshed with somebody my own age, I guess. But, whatever. Life is fun that way. But
Yeah, no,
yeah.
absolutely. So, can I ask, do you want to share the story of what happened? Like, how did you become a widow?
Yeah, I don't mind talking about that at all. It was actually I had went to work on a Monday morning, and he was like, I got up to go to work and he was still in bed asleep and everything. And I came home that afternoon and he was still in bed but was not asleep. He had
Oh,
died during the day after I left. And then I had people saying, "Are you sure he was alive when you?" I'm like, "Yes, he was alive when I left for work." Um, but he had died early in the day. They pinpointed it around 10 o'clock in the morning, which was really weird because I remember being at work at that time. And I distinctly remember around 10 o'clock that morning, I started thinking about him just randomly during my day. And I didn't think anything of it. It's like, people come to mind all the
yeah.
time. So it was nothing different than any other day. But I thought, okay, yeah, whatever. It's nice. I'll tell him he came to mind when I get home from work. And then when I was getting off work, I called him to say I was making a stop before I got home. And of course, he didn't answer. And that didn't shock me or anything. I'm like, he's doing whatever he's doing. So I left a message. But I got home and I walked into our apartment and it was exceedingly quiet. And I'm like, this is not right. He's not here. And so I put my things down and I went about and I walked in the bedroom and then I found him. And that's when all hell broke loose because I knew something was not right. It is too quiet, too still. This is a problem. And so that's how that happened.
That is a really, really hard experience. I appreciate you sharing that. The It was really unexpected,
Very unexpected
really unexpected.
because he was not sick. He was not unhealthy or anything, any more than anybody else going about their day is unhealthy. I mean, all of us have issues with things that may not be perfect or whatever, but he was not unhealthy. He was not sick. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really, really hard. And I want to thank you for sharing that
Sure.
because Um, being a widow is not actually something that I think has sort of a taboo connotation, I mean, a social stigma that comes along with it. But at the same time, it's not actually something that people lead into conversations with. Would you agree with that?
Yes, very much
Yeah.
so.
And in fact, I will say that if I know people and I don't know that part of the story in their life, if I wasn't friendly with them when it happened, often this is the kind of story that comes up pretty far into a friendship or a relationship where it will be like a bombshell discovery. Kind of like you said, people were like, "Oh, what do you mean? There was somebody else before. This is a piece of your past." It's not something that we tell everybody openly.
Because you don't want to just go up to somebody you just meet and be like, "Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a widow."
Right. Right. You don't want to, we
You
don't
don't
always
say
do
that.
that. And one of the challenges with that, I think, is that it is harder for people to find information or know who's gone through that in their life when it happens to them because I mean, there's no way to predict it, but this is a thing that happens.
It does. I mean,
Yeah.
we all will die at some point, and
Yes.
we all have either known or will know somebody who has died.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is something that affects us all, but we don't talk about it.
We don't talk about it. We don't lead with it. And then the flip side is that when you're going through it, it can be really, really hard. So this was a very, very unplanned change in your life. You were young, you guys were planning a lifetime and a future
Right.
together when this happened. So you said this before, but remind me, how much time has passed since this happened?
Uh, he died, it was May 2011. So
It's
how
third,
many years is that?
it were 24, is that 13 years?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Math
I'm
on
not
the
good at
spot is
math,
not
but
my
yeah.
mental math on the spot is not my best thing. It's like one, two, three.
I,
But
me too. Oh my gosh, me
I mean, I
too.
can do it, but while I'm trying to have a conversation or think of
Well,
something
30
like that
more
part of my
years.
brain is not engaged. And so that's really fun. So, but it's been a while. I'm gonna try and like walk people through some of the highlights of the change without like really sitting in the pain and the hardship, but some of the change, how this has shifted since it first happened. The day you told us the story, which it's very obvious that this was an immediate emergency crisis situation right at the very beginning. That's a very, very hard thing. But in the first 6 months to a year after this event, how would you describe your top emotions and what was if you remember to the best of your ability, because this is hard to do, how did you think this was going to impact your life in the year after this happened? So before this happened, you were planning your future with this person. And then this happens in the first year. What were your top emotions and how did you think it was going to impact your life?
Well, I really had no idea how it was going to impact my life. I immediately thought, well, shit, there went that. That plan.
I bet you used a few more sentence enhancers when you were thinking about it,
Yes, I
but
did. I did. But I thought I would censor myself a little bit at least.
I think
But
that's
yeah,
fair.
I was like, that, well, that's not going to happen the way I anticipated, but I didn't know how things would change really. I didn't not expect change, but I didn't really have a way to comprehend the amount of change. And I remember not very long after it happened, my aunt called me and she had been a widow at one point. And she wasn't like that young, I don't think, when her husband had died. I think she was a little older, but she wasn't like, we think widows, we think older
Older.
senior
Yes.
citizen people. So I think she was younger than that, but not as young as I was at the time. But she was like, I hate that this happened to you because I know exactly what you're going to go through. And I didn't even understand what she was saying because I'm like, I mean, I knew she had experienced it, but still, it's like you can't know because I'm not the same person as you, but you can know because some things are universal.
Yeah.
Even though the way you deal with it may be different. The experience is universal in a way. So yeah, I had no idea what to expect really. So
I think that's fair. I think that's very reasonable and very fair. Top emotions you were feeling, it sounds like overwhelm,
yeah,
surprise, confusion,
numbness for the first
numbness.
few weeks, because it was just like emptiness and like this is real, but it's not kind of thing. And then that gave way to um sadness and just overwhelm. But I don't think I ever went through what people call these stages of grief. And that's one of the things that when I work with people dealing with grief, I'm like, there is no stages of grief. I'm like,
So
just
yeah.
give that up. Just give that up. I hate that thought and everything. I'm
Yeah.
like, that
I haven't been widowed, but I've lost my dad died 15 years ago and I've lost some friends along the way. And I have a similar sensation with that. I feel like I felt all of the things at the same time or like switching back and forth from like minute to minute. Like I don't know that I was ever in denial about any of it, but which is one of those phases, but
right,
I could flip from sadness to anger like in a second. Not necessarily at the person, but like
right.
at the world or at whoever I was
Exactly.
dealing with,
I was never angry with him. I was
Right.
never angry with God, which is like the two that you hear people talk about. You're angry with the person who died for dying, and you're angry at God for letting them die. Neither one of those was, but I was angry. I
Oh yeah.
still sometimes experience anger because of it, but I don't know if I would at this point say it's grief. It's just with the fact that crap doesn't go the way we want it to sometimes. And, you know, I'm an imperfect adult, and sometimes I act like a child and throw a temper tantrum.
Oh, in the year after my dad died, I ended up on the phone with a banker, like not even a banker, like a service person at the bank, and they were not handling things the way I wanted to. And I was yelling at that person and apologizing at the same time. I was like, "Listen, this is not your fault, and also I'm really angry about this, and I'm sorry for yelling at you, but I am, and I was like, oh, this is terrible, like, but just
And
not
I'm sure they
really.
didn't like getting yelled at, but they probably were at least like, well, at least she's saying it's not my fault. She
They
knows
probably thought
that. But
it was one of those moments where I was like, I might be actually losing my mind at this moment, but we're gonna get through it. So yeah, I think that's really, really fair. And I think that that's also really helpful for people because one of the things that I wanted to do with this podcast was talk about these changes because we draw these futures for ourselves and rainbows and unicorns and sunny days forever and ever, and everything will be perfect. But the truth is that we just never know and stuff is going to go wrong and we don't know what that's going to be, but the universal experience is that we are all going to experience some bumps and some
yes.
turns, and so hearing from other people that they've come out on the other side I think will hopefully be very helpful. So all right, so that's how you felt at the time. Now it has been 13 years. Is that right?
Hmm.
Okay, so we did this math. I did, there's numbers bouncing around in my head. 13 years. So your life has changed a lot
Oh,
in
yes.
many, many ways. What are some of the ways your life has changed? And when you reflect back on this time, how has that changed? And take us through some of that.
Oh, gosh. There's a lot. Other than the way I look, I'm not anything recognizable as to the person I was at that time because, like, my whole life has changed. Let's see, I went back to school, went to graduate school, got a degree, a master's degree in library and information science. I was working for, at that time, for the county government, um, in their social services office, in the food stamp and Medicare office. So I was one of those people that dealt with giving those benefits out and qualifying people for it, recertifying them, whatever. And then I went and got a degree in library science and became a professional librarian. So that was a
Big
change. I
shift.
don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I would have went to graduate school and changed that had he lived. I mentioned that my whole faith had changed. I started questioning things, which was not the way that I was brought up in the version of Christianity that I grew up in. It was like you just believed in faith and whatever. There was no questions, no room for that because that meant you didn't believe, which wasn't allowed. But I questioned and started all that, and I ended up converting to Judaism at a later point in my adulthood. And so that's been several years now. And I've just like everything about the way I think, the way I act, the people I interact with is different. I am now more vibrant and alive than I was then. And it took someone dying for me to truly live, which is
Wow.
kind of weird, but that's the way I sum it up. It took someone else not being alive anymore for me to be alive in who I am.
That's that's a lot. That's a lot. What about that? If I can push on that just a teeny, just push out a little tiny bit. What about that? What do you think it is about the loss of someone you love that gave you permission to go through that reinvention process?
Well, I guess the main thing is I was like, if I've always been the good girl and done what was expected of me and didn't question things, didn't whatever, didn't rebel in any major ways, and I still became a widow at 31 years old, and my husband, who was 24, died. What did being good get me
Okay.
other than that? I mean, that would happen to anybody. I know that
Right.
intellectually, that could happen to anybody, no matter who they are, what their lifestyle is, no matter what their personality is. We all lose people. I get that. But in my mind at the time, it was like, well, he tried very hard to be what he thought was the right person, and I tried very hard to be what I at the time thought was the right person, and he still died young. So why don't I just do what I want because I'm going to die anyway? So I might as well be who I want to be before I die.
That's so you know the like the Stoic philosophers, they have that phrase memento mori, which is death is always out there, right?
Yeah,
It's because yeah. That's an interesting thing. I think, I mean, I think that those, it's unfortunate about the human experience that we need these big reminders in some weird way. Yours was like a 2x4 to the head, someone you very,
yeah,
but it's like the blessing of these horrific experiences, the reminder that we don't have forever to do the things we want, take the trips and get the degrees and do the job you don't hate, like, do the things. Not that that's a reason like that nobody should ever say that to somebody out loud when they're going through grief, because that would be a terrible thing to say to people. But
right,
it feels weird for me to experience it when it happens, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the reminder to not take life for granted. But then I get survivor guilt and I'm like, that's a terrible thing to I feel it, but yeah. Okay, so you talked about your aunt who was a resource for you in the beginning. What other resources, if any, did you have as a young person who was going through this widow experience?
none at first.
Okay.
Um, there was no one that I knew that had went through something similar other than her. And all of my friends at the time wanted to distance themselves from me because they didn't know how to deal with me.
Oh
Um,
gosh, yeah.
kind of thing. I had one person tell me, I think it was 6 months into it, she was like, okay, when we hit the year mark with this, I don't want to hear you talk about it anymore. And I was like, that's, kind of
Blunt.
unfortunate. But
It's direct. It was
it
not
was
unclear.
very direct. And I'm like, we're not friends anymore. And there's probably a reason for that. But I get that people don't know how to deal with it and they don't want to cause you more pain. They don't know how to help, which is fine and everything. But so I didn't have my
Is it?
friend real. No, I say
Okay.
that. No,
Okay.
no, it's not, because we should, if we're friends with somebody, we should try to be there for them no matter what. Even if we don't understand, we should still be there
I
because
agree.
I
I
mean,
agree.
nobody knows how to go through anything. Even if you have gone through something, like I said, the thing might be universal, but how you experience it is not. So even if I was with someone now who had went through the same thing, it's not the same thing.
Right.
So I would know what's coming, but not how they're going to deal with that. But I would try to be there for them as much as possible, or somebody who lost somebody or something else in another way. But I went out and found more friends, new friends, and actually was just talking yesterday with a friend that I met specifically within the first 4 months after he died. She was one of the first people I met, specifically forced myself to get out of the apartment and go meet people and socialize and do things, which I am not the type of person to go out and socialize by myself with people I don't know, but I forced myself to do it. And so, yeah, I'm still friends with her, and that's beautiful 13 years later. So,
That is
yeah,
beautiful. Okay, so now looking back with a lot of experience, right? You've got a lot more life experience. What are the kind of resources, and this is melds, right? What are the kind of support and resources that you wish you had?
just somebody to sit with me,
Okay.
just somebody to sit with me. Um, Not even do anything, just to be there for me. I
Yeah.
mean, there were some people there, friends, a few, and family at the very beginning within the first week or two. And then after that, it dwindled. And then I was alone. And
Yeah.
so, just somebody to be with me, because I went from being with someone to being alone pretty suddenly and unexpectedly. And
And
it
you
was like,
lived in the place where it happened.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, the first week, I think it might have even been 2 weeks, I stayed at my dad's house with my dad and stepmom because I couldn't be there by myself. But when I did go back to that apartment to stay there, um, the first night I was there, I slept with every light in the apartment on because I was like, I can't deal with the dark.
Oh,
And
goodness.
somebody asked me, don't you think that's silly? You're 31 years old and you're afraid of the dark. I'm like, no, I don't think it's silly. I don't want to be alone in the dark. So I had every single light on in that apartment and went to sleep, because I just couldn't deal with not being able to see what was around me if I wanted to see, because I was alone and it was scary.
It is scary.
So,
And I think, I mean, to reframe that, not to throw your friend under the bus, I think you get credit for moving through it. When you're in that, when you're in that space of like just going through the motions, I think you get credit for however you move forward. Lights on, music playing, inviting friends over, opening, whatever, running the TV
right.
24 hours a day to distract you to be in that space. I think that's forward motion and going through it. And I think all of those steps should be praised because I have never been widowed. I've never been through what you've been through. But when I've gone through really hard times, one of the things that always catches me by surprise is I'm so invested in what's happening in my own personal life that I find myself being amazed at other people going on with their life. Like, how are people going to the grocery store? Like, don't they know how I feel right now? Like, it's
Right.
like, how is the world continuing to turn? And if you haven't experienced that in your life, it's a blessing. Right? It's a
Yeah,
blessing.
it is.
But it might be coming for you someday because that is the kind of thing. So I am thankful for all of the things that you have shared about this. It is a highly emotional story and it's important to share. It's a great story. I think that a lot of listeners are going to identify and benefit from taking the time to share it. And so thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
We are going to do a couple more questions, but I want to make sure that people know how to find you and all of the things like that. Like you are going through a rebrand right now. So when this episode airs, people can find you at micheleleffler.com. Tell people a little bit about what you do
So,
or what you will be doing.
the rebrand is because I'm bringing more things in. The main thing, or the thing I've been doing for the past several years, is spiritual coaching and lifestyle coaching for people who are open to questioning and want to get answers or learn things about themselves without the way they thought things had to be or the way they had to believe things. So I do all kinds of teaching and coaching around different spirituality topics and energy management and that kind of thing. And I do work with people specifically dealing with grief of all kinds because grief is not just about death.
That's right.
In my experience, that was one of the major parts of grief, but I've had other episodes of grief that were around other things too. So anybody who's dealing with grief, loss, or wanting to plan ahead for their own death, because like I said, we're all going to die at some time, and it's better to be prepared ahead of time than to leave your family having to make decisions.
It is. It's not a fun conversation. It's not a fun conversation to have with yourself or with
No,
other
it's not.
people, but it is
It's
so
essential.
nice to have it done
Essential.
so that other people don't have to worry about it.
So,
Yeah.
yes. But I'm also, and the reason I'm rebranding right now in preparation is because I'm bringing in also a totally different side to what I do that's totally unrelated to that, that is consulting with libraries and nonprofits, because I have extensive experience over a decade now working in the library setting and for nonprofit organizations. So helping them to strategic plan and fundraise and get their vision in order to launch or relaunch or whatever they need to make their organization successful. I want to do that as well. And so
Very nice.
that under the same umbrella as the spiritual stuff and all that was kind of a little tricky. So I'm now rebranding for that.
I think it works. Libraries are important and
Yes,
they
they
need
are.
support. So you have a special gift that you're giving to the listeners, and I want to make sure they know all about it. It is called Embracing the Shadow.
Yes.
And its full retail value is $147. To get this bonus, there'll be a link in the show notes, but the best way to get it is to be on the email list because then you can just click on it and it goes right through. If you listen to it, this episode far, far in the future, long after this, it may have expired. So make sure you're signed up and you listen to the episodes as they come out. Tell us a little bit about what that is, embracing the shadow, other than a beautiful name.
It is, I think, a beautiful name, but it's much more than that, and it's not a beautiful process. So, one of the things that I had to do when I was dealing with my grief journey was to embrace my shadow because I became a very ugly person inside, and that was okay. But we're taught, or society teaches us, that we shouldn't be angry. We shouldn't be this, especially as women, but men too. We shouldn't be angry. We shouldn't be aggressive. We shouldn't whatever. And that if we have these emotions, if we have these feelings, we need to reject them. And that is not true. Every single emotion we feel, we have for a reason, and it's there to protect us originally. Now, it may transform into something that's not so protective anymore, but that's usually because we don't embrace it, because we try to push it out of our lives, but we can't push an emotion out of our lives. So embracing the shadow is a course I created to teach you how to learn to love every part of yourself, even the ugly parts, the parts that society tells you are not good or you shouldn't have to get rid of, to how to embrace that and bring it into yourself, because it takes our light, our shadow, our whole selves to make who we are as an authentic person. Because if you have a life that is all light or a life that is all shadow, then it's off balance and things don't work. There is a toxic negative, there is a toxic positive, but we need balance. And that comes from bringing both of those sides together into a whole. And
That's
that's what the course
beautiful.
is about.
That is beautiful. I'm so excited about that. All right. So we're going to close this out with three rapid fire questions. So that they're just for fun. They're not about the interview or anything like that. And the the goal is to try and answer them with just a couple of words.
Okay.
Nobody ever gets that right. Do the best you can. Don't overthink it. Okay. All right. So for fun, I bet you I've totally made a guess now about how you're gonna answer this based on what I know about you, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Okay, so for fun and relaxation, Do you read, watch TV or movies, listen to music, or something else completely?
All of them.
No, pick one. You got to pick one. Pick one. Pick the top one.
Watch TV.
Oh, I was gonna guess read because of the
I
librarian
knew you
thing.
would, but because I do read and everything, but right now, I read mostly with audiobooks listening as I'm driving because I have an hour commute to the library every day. So I listen to audiobooks on the way to and from work, and then I'm surrounded by books all day and things. And
Okay.
when I get home, I just wanted to brain dump and whatever. So if I'm not then working on my business, then I'm watching TV. So
Got it. All right, very good. If you crave snacks, do you choose sweet, savory, or both?
savory.
Okay, very good. So now this one you answered earlier, but I'll ask it anyway. As a kid, were you a rule follower or a rule breaker?
Total rule follower.
All right, and so then how old are you? How old are were you if you remember the first time you broke one of your parents' rules?
I don't know how old I was, but I remember one time, maybe around 5, maybe 6, I told a lie, and my dad totally knew that I was lying. And he's like, I am so disappointed in you. I never thought that you would turn out to be a liar, but here you are telling lies. And that's one of the reasons I never or tried to never break a rule after that and
Because
tried
it
to
was
get it
such
right because I was like, oh my God.
that is little kids are terrible liars. Like they're very easy to catch. Like as somebody who's been around with raising a lot of kids, like I always wondered how my parents and all the other adults knew when I was lying. But now as an adult, I can reflect back on it and be like, because they're terrible at it. They're not good in the beginning. They get better, but in the early beginning, they're like
I knew
not
it was
very good.
terrible and I knew he would probably know. And I don't, of course, don't remember what it was about, but I sure remember the shame I felt when he
Right,
said
exactly. It's
that.
like, did you feed the dog the food? No. And you watch them do it. It's like they're just not very good at it. All right,
So I was
that's
like,
it.
no, I'm not going to do that anymore. So then it was follow the rules.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. That's it. This is a wrap. Michele, you have been a wonderful guest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening today. I hope that you enjoy the show. And before I go, I want to encourage you to become a bigger part of the conversation. Obviously, subscribe wherever you're listening to the show. Listen to more episodes. That'd be great. Obvi again, please write a review and tell your friends about the show. That truly is a great help for getting the show in front of new people. Okay, but more fun for you yourself, head over to imperfectadulting.com and join the email community. You'll get some free stuff right away, and that way you'll begin to get the emails about the podcast. This includes the links for the special offers from the guests, and it's the only way to get that. Also, if you aren't in the mood to listen, I actually include an article directly in those emails. Whee! Now, if you love this and you crave more time with me, Amy, as a coach, a mentor, or just adultier adult, numero uno, check out The Village. If you have a story you want to share with the listeners, I'd love to hear from you. I have an open application. Just let me know you want it. And that's a wrap for today. Until next time, remember, the journey is the destination. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that, not me. Well, until just now, I did just say it. But what I want you to hear today is that if your adulting journey isn't going the way you expected, that may not mean that you're lost. It may just mean that you're on your way. This is Amy Stone, signing off. The Imperfect Adulting Podcast is created and produced by Amy Stone and Amy Says So. Anything expressed on this show is offered as entertainment, and the views of the guests may not always represent the ideas and viewpoints of the host. That's me. Amy does not intend or hold herself out to provide professional advice or recommendations of any kind. In the end, you and you alone need to make those kinds of decisions based on your personal and individual situation, needs, circumstances, and comfort level.